So, today I want to talk about how disposable masks and other forms of PPE, such as latex gloves and antiseptic wipes, have become a waste product that is ending up in our oceans and our seas. The issue of plastics in our oceans is already a long term pollution issue, and this only represents the latest iteration of this form of pollution and human made disaster involving plastic waste. But I still believe that this is worth discussing as it's, again, a new form of the way that we are already polluting. And depending on the outcome of vaccines and mutations, this could continue to be a reality for some time to come. Now, I need first and foremost to come out and say that this is in no way a anti-mask perspective. Masks have saved and continue to save lives. PPE and plastics have consistently made things safer, and there has been an absolute necessity for them during the pandemic, especially in hospitals and medical centers, as well as just everyday use. And honestly, I wish more people took it seriously and that the politics around masks were not as they are, and that more places had mandated the use of masks during the pandemic. That said, we have to acknowledge that disposable masks and these other forms of PPE that contain plastics have become a waste product and are basically ending up not just in the street and in trash disposal facilities, but in our oceans. And we're going to need to address this sooner rather than later. The truth is, in a perfect world, if we had some sort of system that actively cared about the environment and the planet, and we prioritize that as opposed to the things that we tend to prioritize, like corporate greed and capitalism and all these other factors, we would have already had reusable masks in place and a pandemic plan well before any of this happened. But we don't live in that reality. So the fact remains, we are starting to see a good number of these waste products ending up in our oceans. So let's talk about what's going on in these situations. Well, a group in California, in Northern California specifically, the Pacific Beach Coalition, recently noticed a dramatic increase in the discarded PPE on beaches in and around the city of Pacifica, south of San Francisco, where it has been doing monthly cleanups for nearly 25 years. What are we going to do? They ask. We got masks, we got gloves, we got all those hand wipes, the Sani wipes, they're everywhere. They're in my neighborhood, they're in my streets. What can we do? Asked Lynn Adams, the coalition's president. The group and others are calling for attention to the issue, saying that what's recorded is likely only a fraction of the personal protective equipment hitting beaches and oceans. Larger mammals can ingest this PPE, and plastic from the items can disrupt the ocean's food chains. They're all made of plastic, Adams said. Now, it's been shown by an organization called Oceans Asia that these masks could take up to 450 years to break down, and that's not even counting the issues of microplastics. Animals can get trapped in the discarded PPE. One of the most frightening situations involves the loops from the mask. The section that covers the ear can actively cause harm to the animal or the fish that swim through it. When they swim through the loop can either close around them or they can get stuck in it, and then they're dragging this weight of the mask with them as they swim. And if a larger predator then eats the fish, that larger predator fish would then be consuming the mask or any other form of PPE as well. And so this all needs to be taken into account, where a lot of the stuff that's ending up in the streets are ending up in the ocean. A lot of the stuff in the street is causing harmful pollution to us and is clogging up sewer drains and so much more. So we need to start addressing the fact that these disposable forms of PPE are basically ending up as a form of trash and litter that is not being addressed and taken care of in the way that some other forms are. Now, waste management is an issue and will continue to be an issue in any society that we live in. But I have to believe that capitalism is a huge factor in this whole thing. Disposable masks are cheap to produce, they are quick, they are efficient, and you can just throw them to the side. You don't need to create education campaigns, you don't need to distribute long-term usage masks, and it'll continue to be an issue while we are in this system. But while we are here, those of us who are aware of these issues should probably do the best that we can to make sure that we're using things that are not going to end up causing long-term damages to our oceans. Now, even with all of this taken into account, these masks and other PPE still only represent a small part of the plastic that are in the oceans. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't care about it, right? The oceans are an important part of our world. And if you can't bring yourself to want to protect fish or care about the marine life or anything else, then I think that a selfish explanation is in order. The fact is that as these masks break down, they turn into microplastics. And eventually, fish will eat these microplastics. If we eat the fish, we end up with microplastics in our stomach. And it has been shown that we consume up to an average of 5 grams of plastic every week, the equivalent of a credit card. And that these microplastics, which are smaller than 5 millimeters, are making their way into food, drinking water, and even in the air. And these are being intaken by our body, and we do not know the long-term effects. And now, getting back to masks for one moment, it's actually been shown that research around the world has shown that we might have more masks in the ocean than jellyfish in the near future. It is certain to happen in the near future, as we are producing billions and billions of items of PPE to fight COVID-19. One estimate is that in the UK alone, if every person used a single face mask a day for a year, it would create up to 66,000 tons of contaminated waste and 57,000 tons of plastic packaging. In reaction to this, world leaders and politicians are claiming that this needs to be addressed, but again, because of the incentive models that I've talked about, it is probably unlikely to happen in our current systems. I think it's also worth noting that others have claimed that while it is no different than the other forms of plastic, this is still part of the legacy that we're carrying to the next generation. And I think this image is one that's pretty striking. Given the likelihood that porpoises and dolphins in the region could mistake a mask for food, we're constantly getting them finding up and washing up dead, and we're just waiting for a necropsy where we find a mask inside. This person said they believe it is inevitable. So no matter which way you look at it, there's a good chance that we're going to end up in a situation where these masks that are saving our lives, that continue to be important for our daily existence in a pandemic situation, are going to end up in the innards of a lot of sea animals. And we're going to cut them open and we're going to find this. And it's going to move its way through the food chain. So what is the solution to all this? Well, outside of the obvious, which is getting rid of the state and capitalism, where we really don't have the potential or desire to remove any of these factors in this type of society, some of the alternatives include trying to incentivize the production of masks that are either meant to be used multiple times, or that we can develop some sort of mask or tool that would be reusable and create the alternatives of PPE systems that are meant to reduce waste. That should be the first and foremost effort of most governments to try to produce. The next is that public education programs about the importance of masks and waste disposal should be implemented, and that waste management facilities should be given proper infrastructure to properly break down, to the best of their ability, these masks and other forms of PPE. Now, there are some places who are trying to use the use of taxes and fines in order to make it so that companies and people, respectively, would not continue dumping. But I think that taxes tend to fail because most companies find ways around them. Fines for major companies and organizations end up getting worked around because their cost is factored into the development of things like masks or other forms of PPE, and oftentimes that cost is passed down to the consumer. Furthermore, when it comes to the average person, fining them is only going to create a situation where it's going to disproportionately affect poor people. So the money incentive is probably not going to be enough. And this is just another example how using money as a tool in this instance isn't sufficient. And it's ultimately going to end up on the poor and people who need the masks in the first place more than anyone else that will be subject to a lot of these issues, especially because the people who might be having more, disposable masks have a tendency to be people who can't afford maybe a high quality, long term sustained mask. So, with that said, this is an issue that goes well beyond a single individual. This is an issue that's going to take an overhaul of a system of ideas and understandings to fix the mess that we've created. The issue of plastics in the ocean is going to be one that is dealt with for generations. We are going to be dealing with it in terms of how it impacts ecosystems, how it impacts our food chain, how it impacts so much of our reality. And like I said, unfortunately, state systems, government systems, capitalism have little incentive to deal with these common areas like the ocean and treat the ocean with the respect that it deserves, to treat it with the dignity and care that it deserves, that it should be given. And no amount of patching up this system is probably going to fix it and make it better. But we should still take strides to limit the problem while we are in these economic systems and state systems. Because unless we start to do something and start addressing this really important issue of how the thing that we need to protect us during a pandemic is causing harm to our oceans, to animals, to ecosystems, and to our own food supply, we are going to continue in this pattern where we keep hurting ourselves. So with that said, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button and bell for notifications. You can follow me on Twitter and check out my Discord in the description down below. My name is Anarchist Tara, and I hope you enjoyed watching.